it's nearly a year since I turned 40, and I seem to remember a few cards on the theme of life begins at 40. So I thought it might be interesting to sit down with a glass of wine and reflect on the first year of my 40s when I moved to this barn conversion in Cambridgeshire, somewhere I didn't know anyone, and left London after 13 years of living there. So I just looked this up, and apparently a man in the UK born the same year as me has a life expectancy of 84, which means I'm pretty much midlife, which I think to some people would be quite scary, but I don't really think that way. I see it this way. I had no independence until I was 21, not really. You've no choice where you're born, where you're brought up, where you go to school, and even university was kind of inevitable. So I made a choice on what subject to do when I was 15. I did a physics degree, and by 17 I was at uni. So really I don't think of my life as starting until after I left uni. I started doing things I really wanted at 21. So if you think of it that way, I'm only 19. But yeah, I don't really get these people who look back on the golden years. I've never really been someone who looks back much. I don't take many photos really. Like, people have said that to me before. I don't really take photos when I'm on trips or at gigs or whatever. And I think I just know I'm not the kind of person that's going to sit down and scroll through years and years of old photos. Like, it's just not really what I would ever do. I'd rather just experience what's happening now and then get on to the next thing, you know. I do take some photos, but the photos I do take tend to be things in nature, so trees, flowers, garden projects, birds, animals, anything really. I like beautiful skies, stuff like that. For me, the point of life is to continually grow, and the things that happen in the past are sort of lessons for where you want to focus your energies and who you want to have in your life, what kind of people you want to have around you. And I think as you get older, you get better and better at narrowing in on that kind of thing. In general, I'd say I'm typically the happiest I've ever been in my life. There are ups and downs on the way, but I think the trajectory has kind of always been this, and that kind of gives me confidence that things are going in the right direction. So in terms of the house move, if you watch any of my more recent videos, you'll know that last year I was trying to move out of London. I'd been there for 13 years. I had been in the same flat for about 4 years and knew I wanted to sell it a few years before that, but there was this huge legal issue. The solicitor I hired to buy that flat was completely incompetent, and I had to take her to the legal ombudsman, and there was this whole kind of long drama, and basically it took her 4 years to do work that should have been done in a few months. So weirdly, one day before my 40th birthday last year, I found out that she had finally done all this work and I could basically move on. So I don't know if you believe in that kind of thing, but it was very strange timing. The last day of my 30s, it was like this release for this new start to move. And yeah, so from that point it took a few months to sort out all the kind of contracts of buying and moving on and stuff. But yeah, I've been here now since March, so about 6 months, settling into a new town about an hour outside of London. Got some new friends, I've got an old friend down the road, and I can still get into London for lunch or brunch or whatever. So something interesting about turning 40 in other people's attitudes is I noticed this kind of, you're going into a new stage of life and there are all these things you can and can't do now. So I used to bleach my hair and I was told that you can't do that in your 40s, that's just tragic. But I probably will do it again. And in fact, I did do it earlier this year. But yeah, things like that, and sort of final outings to certain clubs and things, because you can do that in your 30s but not in your 40s. And even sort of older people I noticed kind of trying to lure me into their club of aches and pains and just being old, which I just reject completely. I think if you decide you're old, then your body follows. I feel like the mind goes first. So if you decide you're old, decide you're getting aches and pains and you're too old to do this and you're too old to do that, I think that then your face and your body believe you. Anyway, that's my attitude. So stay young, do what you want. And actually that attitude reminds me of one of my favourite documentaries, which is called Advanced Style, which follows, I don't know, like a dozen women, I think all in New York, who are in their older years, sort of from I think 60 to 100. It was the first time I'd ever come across Iris Apfel, for example. I think she's the most famous person in that. But there was this woman, I remember, she had some of the most memorable quotes. Her name is, I wrote it down, her name is Ilona Royce Smithkin, and she was 93 when the documentary was filmed. And she said two things that I thought were really interesting about ageing. The first was, I'm just going to read this from my iPad. She talks about how she had no self-confidence for a lot of her life, and then she said this: I came into my own about maybe 10, 12, 13 years ago. And she was 93 when she said that. So she came into her own in her early 80s. And I just thought that was amazing. Like, to think that you can get to that stage in life and still be discovering new things, still be finding yourself. And then she also said, I'm an artist and a teacher, and lately I have become a performer as well. And she goes on to talk about how she has just started performing in clubs and pubs singing, and I just thought that was amazing at 93. Yeah, so if you think 40 is old, you're deluded. But I do think we are surrounded by this kind of obsession with youth, and even in the last year I have felt my attitudes to ageing shifting. I did make a video about a year ago, just after my birthday, sort of montage of how I'd celebrated, but I was really careful, and this, I'm kind of ashamed of this actually, but I cropped out the birthday cake candles, so you still got all the happy birthday stuff, and then there was a big 40 candle on the top of the cake, and I cropped it out and put on light flares and everything so that you couldn't see it, because I was didn't want people to know I was 40, and now I don't care. I feel really different about it. I think aging is first off a privilege, because what's the alternative? Dying. I'm not sure if it's just the YouTube algorithm knowing how old I am, but I've noticed a lot more videos and channels from YouTubers who are 40, 50, 60 plus, and I find myself drawn more to those videos. It's people doing things I'm interested in, living off grid, start a homestead or stuff like that. I don't know if I'd ever do that, but I'm obsessed with watching videos about off-grids and homesteads and all that kind of thing, and just sharing knowledge, because it makes sense to me now to watch people who are 40, 50, 60, 70, because they know more, they have more to share, and I just think it's interesting. And I think if you are someone who's not 20, not that there's anything wrong with being 20, who wants to start a YouTube channel, I just think you've got plenty to say, so why not? Because when I started my channel, I was in my 20s, and it felt like everyone was in their 20s on YouTube. And even, I think I was 29 and I felt really old. But yeah, I think it's great now on here. There's so many different YouTubers of different ages. And I think as well, it's actually good to acknowledge that you don't have an infinite amount of time left. I think 40 feels like a really good age. You've learned a bit, but you've still got quite a long time if you're lucky. And yeah, like, I want to be one of these 100-year-olds who can still touch my toes and do my yoga every morning, but I mean, that's 60 years away, which makes me think, wow, I might have a long time to go. But just knowing that, okay, I'm not 20, 25, 30 anymore, I think it gives you real focus. So part of the YouTube thing again is to try and get into a regular schedule with it, but not let it eat up all my time. I talked about in one of my previous videos that it took me about 40 working hours to make every video, and it just wasn't sustainable on top of a job, on top of other creative stuff. Like, I love writing, I'm really trying to put energy into writing at the moment as well, and so I want to do all of these things, but as soon as one of them takes up all of my time, the others just fall away, and then that thing also falls away because I don't want to do it forever and ever. Realising that there's limited time in my life, in my week, in my day, kind of helps me to focus and be realistic about what I can do with the time I have. So yeah, I actually think that's something quite positive that's come from realising I'm starting another decade. It's also really helped me to start saying no to people and things I'm not interested in, and to make me value my time more. So I don't know who this has helped, but maybe if you are younger than me, you don't need to fear getting to 40, and if you're older than me, please share your wisdom in the comments. Anyway, I'm going to finish my wine and maybe start editing this video. Oh, and one other thing, the solicitor I mentioned, just in case anyone's interested from the previous videos, she got a rebuke from the Solicitors Regulatory Authority and is now shut down. So we'll call that karma. Anyway, I just turned you back on to tell you that.